The great gray owl, the world's largest owl by length, is highly prized by birders and photographers because it's scarce in the U.S. This beautiful, classic 20-minute film captures the great gray like no other.
This is one of the rare birds of planet Earth. It came into existence even before the Great Ice Age, and somehow survived that long, harsh time. Today it still makes its principal home in the north, in the evergreen forests of both the New and the Old World, and people travel long distances just for the sight of one. In mid-January, word came that a great gray had been sighted in the bush country of southeastern Manitoba. Had it been summertime, hundreds of people would have made their way here, binoculars and cameras in hand. Among North American bird watchers, the great gray owl is number 4 on the most wanted list. In recent years, it has been frequently sighted, but its nesting habits rarely captured on motion picture film. Almost 5 feet, or 1.5 meters from wingtip to wingtip, the gray is the largest member of the owl family in North America, and one of the least afraid of man. In spite of the deep snows of the Canadian winter, 2 men did make their way to where the owl had been sighted. Their purpose, to study the habits and photograph the features of this splendid bird, sharp, pointed talons that can plunge through half a meter of snow to capture its prey. Eyes that can spot a mouse on top of snow from 300 meters away. The instinct behind this activity is so strong that when a person offers the top of his head, the bird automatically starts preening. In this case, the man being preened is Dr. Robert Nero. The photographer is Robert Taylor, also well known as an expert naturalist. Their initial objective, to band the owl so that its later flight path might be traced and recorded. The northernmost breeding range of the great gray owl includes Alaska, the Yukon, and the Northwest Territories. Its southern territory extends into northern Minnesota and the mountains of the northwestern United States. One month after the first sighting, the owl was still in the territory, and Dr. Nero and Robert Taylor decided on an unlikely experiment. They decided to build it a nest. It was not entirely an uninformed idea, Dr. Nero being the man who wrote the definitive book on the great gray owl for the Smithsonian Institution. It was well known to both men that gray owls, as a matter of custom, do not build their own nests, but rather take over suitable quarters that have been abandoned by another stick-nesting species, a goshawk, a raven, or even a common crow. It took a lot of labor in near-zero weather, but that's normal for bird watchers and men of science. And the big question remained, would the owl and its mate agree to occupy the finished product? Only time and a lot of patience would tell. And in the interlude of time and patience, Dr. Nero made some poetic notes on the subject. A bird of mystery, he wrote. The great gray owl bears in its aloofness some of the remoteness of the vast Northland. Its plumage the color of lichens and weathered wood. Its soft hooting, part of the wind. Another day, another vole. A mouse or a shrew would serve as well. But in this part of mid-Canada, voles are the main item in the diet of the great gray owl. When small mammals are in plentiful supply, the owl lives well. Otherwise, it must move to other hunting grounds. Right now in Manitoba, the living is good. The vole is captured in the talons, killed by one sharp stroke of the bill, and carried away to a safer perch. Will the man-made nest be occupied? Only one way to tell. Once more up the tree, hoping for some tangible sign that the owl has looked things over. And there, after many long days, is the hoped-for evidence. Only a feather, but it will serve, for it means that the owl has been there and will probably return. Acting on that belief, Nero and Taylor now embark on another construction project, a form of scaffolding that will serve as an observation platform from which they can both view and film the expected occupants of the nest. Then, to the watchers and waiters, the best of all possible news. The arrival on a bright March day of a female of the species. In the end, it would be this good lady who would make the final decision about the taking of a mate and the occupying of a nest. Taylor filmed from every possible vantage point and in every available light. For the dedicated birdwatcher, images like this are the ultimate reward. A few weeks later, a change of scene. It was clear now that the male and female owls had agreed upon a partnership. Both Bob Taylor and Robert Nero had heard the courtship rituals, the hooting of the male, the pleading response of the female, and had observed the pair as they agreed upon a suitable nest. It was not, however, the original high-level nest, but one much lower down, in the fork of a nearby tree. The observation platform was painstakingly moved, and another blind assembled. And finally, all of the patience and the effort were rewarded 5 times over. The laying of eggs is spaced out by the female owl, sometimes literally days apart. Because of the low temperature when the eggs are laid, incubation begins immediately with the first egg. Hence the young break out of their shells on different days and are somewhat easier to manage. From this point on, the mother owl will stay in the nest almost 24 hours a day, come fair weather or foul, undisturbed in this case by the silently turning camera and the man in the blind. For a few minutes once a day, the eggs are left unattended while the mother stretches her wings and attends to her private needs, and then home again. Both male and female owl are endowed with exceptional hearing. Facial discs formed by close-set feathers serve to direct sound to the ears, and as the right ear opening is larger and higher than the left, it permits an extraordinary triangulation of sound. The incubation period for a gray owl egg is approximately 30 days. And part of the mother's job is to provide a constant temperature of about 40 degrees centigrade, regardless of how low the outside temperature may be. And finally, in a small burst of glory, the waiting ends. Mother and her young are doing just fine. Time now for the family portrait. For up to 2.5 months, from the laying of the first egg through the development of the nestlings, the female will be in constant attendance at the nest, and the survival of all of them will depend on the hunting skills of the male. One vole delivered, hundreds more to go. The young are ravenous and grow from 40 grams at hatching to 500 grams within 3 weeks. A full-grown male tips the branches at around 2.5 pounds, just over 1 kilogram. The female weighs about 20% more, the lowest body weight for its size of any owl in the sky. In slow flight, it is a thing of beauty, or terror, depending on your perspective. Aerodynamically perfect, it represents the ultimate in silent flight. Meanwhile, back at the nest, many mouths waiting to be fed. Where is the great hunter? If the young are in good health, they may leave the nest 3 weeks after hatching, following an intense burst of early growth that must be supported by a constant shuttle service between ground and nest. During the initial growing period, the male will deliver up to a dozen mice or voles in the course of a day, not counting the ones he eats to sustain his own strength. At the age of 2 weeks, a healthy owlet can gulp down an entire vole in one piece, and it always goes down head first. A hairy woodpecker only 30 feet away makes the same exchange in somewhat smaller doses. And then came the day of the great storm. The winds rose, thunder rumbled in the near distance, and in the skies overhead, clouds began to gather. The top layer of the female's plumage turns into a pretty soggy mess, but just beneath that are many downy protective feathers, and all it will take is a little warm breeze and some preening to straighten out the top coat. Actually, while she shelters her young from the rain, body heat from the young radiates around the mother's underside and helps keep her warm. The male seeks solitary shelter. And finally, as is the way with all storms, the winds die, the rains end, and the world of nature starts to dry out. For the owl family, it's back to business as usual. Now it's the turn of the last hatched, the smallest member of the family, and he's eager to give it his best shot. If ambition would serve, this would go down as the others have gone down, but too much is too much. At this point, the mother dissects the rodent, keeping the entrails for herself and serving up the rest in bits and pieces. Another admirable feature of the great gray owl is that the young never foul their nest, a fact well known to Bob Taylor, here in search of yet more evidence. This strange item is known as a pellet. It's what remains of the mouse or vole that was swallowed whole. The undigested portion is regurgitated. Only fur and bones remain. Before long now, these young ones will have to decide on a territory. If the supply of rodents remains plentiful, some will stay here in southern Manitoba. Others will set out for more distant parts, some south to nesting grounds in Minnesota in the United States, others east to the woodlands of Ontario in Canada. Whatever their final destination, one thing is certain. All who would survive will remain within their natural range, the boreal forests of the north, where the winds first carried the soft hooting of the great gray owl.